Welcome back, lads. Another day, another quality banger for you guys, right? Today, I want to touch on. Now, I don't usually speak about this, okay, because it varies, but I want to talk about how much capital you actually need to get started with Airbnb, okay? So, for running your Airbnb business, there are basically three different ways to do it. You can either buy a property, buy a house. Okay, so invest in a property where you purchase it and then you are now the legal owner paying a mortgage per month on that property. Or you can arbitrage a property. So you can rent it to essentially sublet as a short-term rental. Okay, you agree with the landlord, you can sublet, blah, blah, blah. You rent it on Airbnb and you pay them a fixed amount per month in rent to operate it. Whatever you make on top of that is your profit. And then there's co-hosting. Okay, that's where you can manage somebody else's property as a short-term rental and then take all or a share of the profits. Okay, and that can be negotiated with them. So essentially there's three different tiers of capital investment required, right? Because each method has its own investment upfront, and each property you go for is also going to be unique because they're all going to have their own price, okay, their own cost attached. And that depends on the market that you're investing in. It depends on the country that you're investing in. It depends on everything to do with mortgage rates and how much deposit is actually accepted by lenders if you're going to buy, for example. Okay, and again with renting, how much deposit is required? Do you have to pay first, last month, and security deposit? Do you pay security deposit and first month's rent, which is the most common, but some want first, last, and security deposit. Okay, so that's all going to affect your initial investment. Okay, so on the most expensive end, you're going to have purchasing the property. So that's going to be the most money up front from yourself. And that can be anything from a 5 to 10% deposit. If you're a first-time buyer, usually a 5% deposit is offered. Alternatively, 10%. So if the property, for example, is 100K, it's an apartment, it's 100K. You're going to need 10K for that deposit. Then you're going to have a monthly cost of your mortgage and all the other utilities and insurances and everything else that goes along with it. But the property cost is going to be the mortgage. Now, that cost of the mortgage per month is actually you paying that money to yourself, because that's going to build equity in that property, which you now own. So you're going to have to pay a larger deposit up front, and there's larger capital required, but each month that you pay that mortgage, you're essentially paying yourself. Does that make sense? And that's going to be the most expensive way to get started with Airbnb, of course, but you're essentially building up a property portfolio, which is going to be worth something down the line, and you're going to have options to refinance, okay, and pull money out of that property. Then option number two, that's going to be arbitrage. That's going to be rent to rent. That's going to be renting a property from somebody to then rent it out as a short-term rental. And the investment required, the capital required, is going to be between 1 to 5K. Okay, and that's not including furnishing. So to actually get started with the property, and the reason I say that is because I'm in the American market, right? I have my properties in Florida. So the average rent of kind of a decent 2-bedroom apartment is really 2K a month, 1,500 to 2K a month. Okay, and those are the kind of properties that I'm interested in. So if I'm paying a deposit and first month's rent, now the security deposit is usually a full month's rent. That can be negotiated. So I always advise negotiate that with the landlord. Try to get it down to about $500. Be frank with them. Say, hey, look, I'm going to be investing in assets to put into this property, in furnishing, in amenities that I'm going to have for guests. So I need that upfront capital, but I'm willing to give you $500 as a security deposit, so that if something gets damaged and if anything goes wrong, you have that 500 to cover it. But I can assure you, I'm going to keep up with the painting. I'm going to replace anything that gets broken, because that's in my best interest, because I need the property to be in good shape for tenants. So usually you get away with a security deposit and a first month's rent. Now it depends on your area. You could be in a cheaper state or a cheaper city in the US. You could be in Europe. You could be in Eastern Europe, for example, where rental prices are between $300 to kind of $600 a month is going to get you a decent 1 to 2 bed apartment. So in some of these places, the capital required is not going to be as high, but then of course the price per night is not going to be as high. So it's all about margins, but the capital required for an arbitrage unit is kind of minuscule for how much money you're going to be able to make, okay? Because your expense in terms of rent is oftentimes going to be very similar to your expense for a mortgage. So the monthly cost for the mortgage is usually around the same amount as the monthly cost for rent. So you're going to be making the same profit right off the bat. Now, you're not going to be building equity. If you're arbitraging somebody else's unit, you're essentially paying somebody else's mortgage. So while that expense is the same, it's not going to ever come back to you. Does that make sense? It's not going to come down the line where you sell the property or you refinance the property. You're not going to have that option. That money is burnt. It's gone. But lower cost of entry, and you then get to make a similar profit per month, and you can also scale faster, because when you're making that property and you only need between 1 to 5K to get your second property, same amount to get your third, same amount to get your fourth, you can grow quite quickly with arbitrage units. Whereas if you're purchasing, you constantly have to build up that capital, and now you're not going to be able to buy your first property as a residential mortgage. You're going to have to do it as an investment mortgage, which is usually between 20 to 25% deposits required. Okay, guys, I go more in depth on these types of Airbnb models and the business as a whole and your investing as a whole and how much money it's going to cost you up front in the school. Join the community. Guys are signing properties, they're getting started in Airbnb, and we're helping them completely step by step along the way. So if it is something you're interested in, guys, check out the school or stay glued to the YouTube channel, guys. I'll be posting videos like this constantly, and anything specifically that you want to hear, leave it in the comments.